Good morning, Broncos fans. This is Legends of Mile High, and we are going to get all the live streams going here in just a second. But as we do, I just want to say welcome to the show. We have a very nice show today. We've got a great guest coming all the way from Ireland. Colum Cronin from the Irish NFL Show is joining us today. So jump into the chat and make sure you add some comments so that we can talk Broncos for the next 30 to 40 minutes. So welcome to the show, Colum. Good morning. Welcome to
How's it going, Thomas? Yes, it is. It's breakfast time, obviously stateside. It is lunchtime here in Dublin, and I saw you lifting. I think it was a coffee cup just before we came on.
Yeah.
I have a big mug of tea, so cheers.
Cheers to you. Well, thank you for joining the show. Really appreciate it. Coming all the way in from Ireland, and again, you're the co-founder of and co-host of the Irish NFL Show. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So I've been a Broncos fan a long time, and then a group of us started the Broncos Europe fan group, and then myself and Michael from that group joined up with a couple of other guys a few years ago and started the Irish NFL Show, which has been great, and still obviously love to talk Broncos football, but it does mean that we get to talk about all the teams from around the league. And given the past few years in Denver, Thomas, it has been nice to have a distraction, I can say.
Yeah, it has been pretty rough being a Broncos fan, especially diehard Broncos fan, watching this last few seasons transpire and not used to the winning. So when did you start to become a Broncos fan?
Yeah, it was all the way back. It was the '89 season. I was very young, but they used to show the highlights on TV back. They started in the late '80s here, showing the highlights. It had started a little bit earlier in the UK, but in Ireland it started the late '80s, and that was when we were playing in those beautiful neon orange jerseys. I wish we'd go back to that. And there was a number 7, and he was here, there, and everywhere. And I fell in love with the Broncos. And I was that young, Thomas, that I genuinely thought we had a chance in that Super Bowl against the 49ers. I'll tell you how young I was. But the fact that I stuck with the team despite that loss, I think that's a testament to, being a true fan.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I remember that still clear as day. It was rough watching that game, and having to listen to all your buddies giving you crap about them getting beat so badly. But you know what? They came back and won a couple more, and then with Elway, and then Super Bowl 50. So we can't complain too much. But that was a rough one. So I'm gonna just jump in the comment. Dom's coming in saying good morning, Thomas Scott, Broncos country. Big game tomorrow for us UGA fans, but also Denver Broncos for life. So thanks, Dom, for checking in this morning. Really appreciate it. Regular on the show. We've got Colum here to so ask any questions, especially we're going to be talking about the London game here pretty soon. So Albert Knoppers, big time supporter of the show and Mile High Huddle. Thank you so much for coming in from Facebook. Good morning, Thomas, and Broncos country. So Colum, what I got to ask you this. I've never been to London. I've been to a few Broncos games, but the Broncos game in London is definitely, it's got to be a different atmosphere than any other game that we have here in the United States. Can you talk a little bit? I know you're there. I know you got to interview some players, met a lot of great fans. Can you give us a little bit, or as much as you want, about the atmosphere, what it was like watching the Broncos in London and all the events leading up to that game?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose that the first thing to say, I wasn't at the original Broncos game when they came to Dublin or to London, when it wasn't a regular season game. The throwback that people refer to, and Wembley Stadium looked very different then, but this was a totally different vibe to when the Broncos had been over in 2010 with everything that surrounded it. I mean, at that point, the team came in pretty late. There wasn't a huge amount happening. Obviously, there was the Josh McDaniels debacle. Let's call it that. And then it just felt like, things were going wrong in the franchise at that point. Nobody wanted to be there. This was a completely different vibe. And the Broncos had came in really early, and they, in fairness to the marketing and the comms team, they put a lot of effort into the fan experience. So they had a Broncos bar in London, and they had different people there. So Steve Atwater was there on the Thursday night, and then on the Friday night, it wasn't just Steve; it was all the ownership group. All of the owners were there. Damani Leach was there. George Payton was there. That was really interesting because I've been going to a lot of the London games, been in and around the London games, and look, every franchise is different, and I suppose it depends on how your season is going, but it is very rare to see, the ownership group, the team president, the general manager, and some legends all together. I think it was a great opportunity for the ownership group to get a sense of the fact that Broncos country is global. One of the nicest moments, and I know people in the States may not have seen it. They may have caught glimpses of it on Twitter. I did tweet it out, but the pub spontaneously burst into singing Happy Birthday to Steve Atwater, which is a lovely moment. And he really, really appreciated that. So the build up to the game was really good, and we did a Broncos Europe event on the Saturday night, and it was incredible. Like, there were fans there from all over the United States, from Australia. I'm kind of going further afield to bring it back into Europe. I mean, there was loads of European fans from Spain, from France, from Italy, from Scandinavia, from Switzerland. It was really fantastic, and just a great atmosphere. It was the Jags home game, but it wasn't Jags home game. This was like when Broncos country takes over SoFi, there was a more orange certainly in the stadium. There were Jags fans there, don't get me wrong. Jags fans do show up, but that is a franchise and in London who've been particularly badly hit by the situation, the fact that they haven't been able to do as much over the past couple of years because of COVID. But Broncos country showed up massively, and you could hear the noise and the response to that. And it was interesting because I think sometimes there's this perception maybe that fans over here only cheer like for field goals or don't understand maybe the intricacies of the rules. And maybe that was the case 40 years ago, but I can guarantee you that isn't the case now. So I think it was really great few days. And hopefully that the Broncos organization, I mean, kudos to them for what they put on. Hopefully it won't be the last time we will see them, over on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, it seemed from watching from afar that the Broncos were the main event over there. Even with the season going the way it is, it's a pretty good testament to Broncos fandom to show up like that in London and cheer for the Broncos. I thought it was quite amazing. I can imagine if they were, had a winning record and everything was going great, that it would happen. But even so, it was still an event to watch. Did you get a chance to talk to any of the legends that were over there?
We talked briefly to Steve Atwater, but I've been fortunate in terms of having the opportunity to meet Steve previously. So I was just conscious, I didn't want to monopolize his time. So just the opportunity to kind of say hello to him, to say hello to George Payton, to say hello to Damani Leach. We did get to talk to the players at training on Thursday and on Friday, and that was interesting. And they had used this as an opportunity, I think, to maybe kind of come together a little bit. Training camp has changed so much for most NFL teams. Like if you go back, and I think we're a similar sort of injury, but if you went back maybe 20 years, possibly maybe even before, teams went away for training camp, right? That's what teams did. That's not the case now. Teams, the vast majority, probably 25 of the 32 stay at their training base. This is an opportunity for the team to go away without anybody else. So it was a break from everything at home and they came together and they talked about how they had all gone out together on the Tuesday night after they arrived. It wasn't mandatory, but everybody showed up. And I suppose, look, for all of us who are Broncos fans, the hope is that the team can coalesce around this. A late victory, getting together, maybe getting the opportunity to bond. That is certainly the hope. The players were in really good spirits. I can say that KJ Hamler is absolute a blockbuster. He is incredibly entertaining and high energy, and he brought it every single day, and obviously brought it on Sunday. We saw him on the field, but he is a guy who you can see kind of raises everybody's spirits, gets everybody up. But all the players were really generous with their time, and it was interesting to hear, I suppose, about like Brandon McManus had 48 cousins come over from Ireland for the game.
Wow.
Corliss Waitman was born in Belgium, grew up in the Netherlands, grew up a massive soccer fan, and this was his mother's first opportunity to ever see him play professionally. So there were lots of kind of nice little moments that came about that we learned about in the lead up to the game. And again, kind of highlights just how big the game is internationally now.
Yeah, it's amazing. The NFL has done a great job of promoting it, and it is, for us, in the United States, it's a bummer to have to get up early and watch watch it at 7:30, which it really isn't a problem for me. But some people on the Pacific time zone can really that can really kind of bother them or whatnot. But I think they're doing a great job. I think it's wonderful to bring fans across the U.S. and this show's on in the morning, but we get a lot of people that aren't, so you're obviously in midday, and it's great to share that with people around the world. But something that you said caught my interest. So you talk about it maybe a coming together moment for the team. I know it was a win. It didn't look great at times, but it definitely looked better. What do you think? What do you think the outlook now coming out of that game into the bye and then starting the back half of the season? What's your outlook for the team?
I'm intrigued to see what changes might be made at the bye. I think sometimes there can be a tendency to be almost kind of too positive or too negative, right? Like some people are looking at this going, oh, look at the Eagles last year and look what they were able to do in turning their season around. But the Eagles had like a number of different factors. They had a hugely experienced staff. They had like an assistant who had 3 years play calling experience, who Sirianni was able to hand the play calling duties over to him. They had a fearsome offensive line that they could lean into and kind of didn't have to put as much pressure on their young QB, allowed him to grow. Equally, I don't think, it's not like we're the worst team in the league either. And I think what we've seen this year, time and time again, is parity. And that's the word that keeps coming up. And anybody can beat anybody. There are very few super teams this year. Look, the Bills and the Chiefs obviously stand out in the AFC. But I think Howie Roseman deserves immense credit for what the Eagles have done. But I think most teams should potentially look towards the Eagles and say, it's not about the best players in every position, but it's about the best team, and it's about bringing it together and finding pieces that complement one another. So for the Broncos, there's a lot of stuff to like. Maybe and you hate seeing anyone injured, but maybe Kush getting injured has actually, solved an issue on the O-line, because here's a guy, our center, was flagged twice in the month of October for false starts. This is a guy, like, your center gets done for that. So by having Glasgow come in, maybe that helps solidify that. Obviously, the Bradley Chubb trade, we'll have to see how that impacts. For me, honestly, what I'm looking at is get a win against the Chiefs and get Russ looking more like Russ. I'll be honest, Thomas, I think maybe peak Russ is gone, like absolutely, all pro, one of the elite, but I think Russ can be a very good QB if you put him in the right system. So I think the back end of the season, I think I think there was a lot of talk around Hackett and potentially changing. I think after the bye, realistically, are you going to make changes now? I don't think so. I think this is, for us, is all about seeing who's going to be here in 2023. Can we find a system that suits Russ that we can build on? Because we really, really need to get it right next year. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see us. I suppose my absolute ideal is we emerge with a winning record, even if the playoffs are beyond us, just so we don't have a losing record again.
I agree. I'm just going to take a moment. Arlie Tucker's coming in from Facebook saying, keep Glasgow at center. Just what you said. Not great, but he did the job. We tend to agree with that. We thought, you and I both thought Cushenberry was a kind of a wink link on that line. So Arlie, thank you for coming in. Dakota Whitehouse came in to say hello. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. What I wanted to kind of say as you were talking, there's a lot of grim outlook on the team, but if you think about it, the Broncos weren't getting blown out. I mean, they were keeping it close, and I've been saying it all season, regardless of how Hackett's been coaching. There's a lot of miscues, a lot of questionable play calling at certain times. But what I've always said is all they needed was a player to make a single play in most of those situations for a victory. And I think you saw that happen. More than one player came up big in that London game against the Jaguars, and they came away with a victory. So if you can think that someone could step up going forward in all of those close games, we might see the Broncos come away with a winning record. It's possible, and that gives hope for the future. I've been saying that too, like that. You don't want to give up on the season and say, oh, because that just will carry over to next year. Keep working. Keep fighting that good fight, come away with momentum going into to the end of the season. But again, they were there. Every game is within one score that they've lost. They could easily have a better record. They could easily have a even worse record. But that's kind of where I stand. So going forward, we'll catch Brad D here before I ask this question. Good morning, Thomas, and good morning to Colum as well. I hope that Hackett tweaks the scheme moving forward. That's a great question. Besides the O-line, Colin, what do you think there could be some changes? What changes do you think Hackett could make that would help this team going forward?
I think I've looked, the O-line is obviously the biggest thing. We need to get the running game going. I know that we haven't had guys like we haven't had a breakout run at all this year. And that kind of, we've been on the receiving end of it, like Breece Hall and what he was able to do for the Jets. And we have seen that a number of times over the last few years. I remember another Jet, was it Jamison Crowder, went for 200 yards against us. So to me, I think getting the running game going, and obviously there's a number of guys now there in the backfield. They're looking to do different things. Chase Edmonds coming across there, I think, looking for a guy for kind of that they can involve in the passing game as well. I think that's obviously key because that just hasn't really gotten going. Murray is very good on the ground and first guy to get 2 touchdowns in London in a single season. But how many realistically are any of those running backs? Like Edmonds might because he has the contract, but how many of those are going to be on the roster next year? And I think it was Benjamin Solak had the tweet yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. Jerry Jeudy, best in the league against man, 73rd wide receiver against zone. That's a disparity. I don't know if I've ever seen, Thomas, if I've ever seen such a disparity in terms of that. We need to get some consistency. We need to find a way that Sutton and Jeudy can have success together. And for me, in terms of the tweaks, Greg Dulcich, like that is continue to lean into that as much as you can. Like usually for rookie tight ends, it takes, first seasons aren't great, even for the great tight ends, Mike Ditka and Kyle Pitts struggled at time, obviously last year. So to me, the passing game is where we need to really get the guys involved. The fact that even Richard Sherman talked about, who has been very, very critical and at times like ridiculously so of Russ. But even he came out yesterday and said they're not doing Russ any favors. I'm hoping we use the bye week to make some tweaks. It's very difficult to change everything. But look, as we said, they had the time away together in London, right? So there was that opportunity, and then obviously the bye. So it will be. I think I would hope there will be a different vibe to the offense when they do take the field next against the Titans.
Yeah, I'd like to see, like you said, more long runs, and I think that was part of the struggle. Has been a lot of the interior offensive linemen struggled to get to the second level. I've noticed Cushionberry, for one, is hard for him to get to the second level. I know Glasgow's older, maybe can't move as well, but hopefully you can see that happening. And then you've got to have some blocking on the outside from the wide receivers, hopefully to get those long runs. But you're right, we have to watch the Broncos go back to solid running game, open things up, help Russ, especially get some bootlegs going. I think there'll be some tweaks. I hope there's some tweaks, and I really hope Hackett decides to move away from the play calling and give that responsibility to somebody else, because I think he's had a poor time. He really struggled with some of those play calls. But Albert Knoppers has a great question for you here. Who was your MVP for that game in London? He says his was Dulcich.
Dulcich was fantastic, and he certainly changed the offense, right? Because like Thomas, I can say, yeah, as the Broncos country shut up, but that first half, like all the penalties and like there was a level of frustration, which I think you've also heard at Mile High this year. I am delighted Doug Peterson and his staff made the call they did on the 1 yard line to throw it, and Justin Simmons' interception was so important. Draymond was a key as well, though. Trevor Lawrence never looked comfortable. And you could have it be a different team, but there's a whole separate podcast about Trevor Lawrence. But Draymond was key to disrupting them and not allowing them to really kind of find rhythm. And like if Trevor Lawrence had any sort of rhythm, I feel, given how Etienne gashed us, and Etienne looked magnificent. Like, to see him live, he is so lively. He's so slippery. He's just a fantastic runner. But like, if they had got anything going in the past game, that would have been a concern. But we absolutely shut them down. And even, when they had the ball for the, they got it back, the ability, and obviously we get the interception. But I can say, like, I was sitting there going, I don't see them driving down the field. Like, we had them at that point. They were so concerned by the Joneses, and obviously then by at that time Bradley Chubb and Benito. So I think maybe you need two. I think maybe you have Dulcich as your offensive guy, and I think you have Draymond as your defensive guy.
I agree. I think Draymond Jones was fantastic in that game. Obviously earned Player of the Week awards, I believe, this week. So speaking of the pass rush, what are your feelings on the Bradley Chubb trade?
I was okay with it. I understood it. I really did. I think it was always coming when you invested money in Gregory. When you invested like what was a high draft pick for us, right? Because we obviously didn't have the first round in Benito. And when you hear, that was interesting, and fans will hear it in the media, but being on the ground at training, like when you hear the way in which the team talks about Baron Browning and what they feel about him, and also look at some of the older pros from not just from Denver, but from around the league, the way they talk about him. I always felt like if they got the right deal, they were going to move Chubb. And given the contract that he got from the Dolphins, I think people probably see it even more now. The reality is that we have a QB on a superstar contract. Hopefully the play, comes up to meet that. But when you have that, you end up having to cut your cloth in other ways. And Denver hasn't had that for a while. And obviously, say even in a Super Bowl season, Manning took a haircut. But when you are having like one position earns that much, you can't pay everyone. And so for Denver, I think they looked at it. They looked at the fact that they had the other edge rushers. They looked at the fact that they are going to have to pay Draymond. And let's be realistic as well, Thomas, that O-line is going to need serious work in the offseason. And be that through free agency or be that through the draft. They're going to have to do something there. I think there's been a change around the league in terms of O-line guys coming in and being able to perform straight off. I would say like Tristan Wirfs is probably the ultimate example of that, a guy who came in and looked like a superstar from day one. But Rashawn Slater with the Chargers, when he was healthy, he was fantastic. And the Seahawks have two guys who are performing to a pretty solid level. So you can find O-line guys who can contribute from day one in the draft. So, and in fairness to George Payton, like look at the draft picks that he has made are all contributing. Like, we talked about Dulcich, Benito, and even Mathis, who obviously had the 4 penalty game. But aside from that, he has been very solid for where he was drafted. I think I get why it was done, both from a draft perspective and from a contract perspective. I wish Bradley Chubb well. I hope he goes on to have a great career in Miami. But I get why Denver made the move that they did.
Yeah, absolutely. At first I was like, I'm not really fond of the move because I didn't really care for the Gregory signing to begin with. I thought he was, always living off about, well, what can he do? And he hasn't really done it yet. And so I was kind of, well, man, we should have just paid the money to Chubb. But when I saw the contract that Chubb got, if that's what he was looking for, I kind of changed my mind on that. It's like, you pay that much money for a player who was often injured and was, when he was on the field, he was fairly impactful, but not a Von Miller type player in my mind. So after I saw that contract, I kind of changed my mind. I was like, I'm fine with it. But the only problem I do have with it is the defense has been what has kept the Broncos in these games. And it's the reason why they haven't gotten smacked around really badly, because the offense has not really contributed much. So I was a little bit surprised that they would weaken that side of the field, but I'm a big fan of Baron Browning. I think he's going to be a terrific player in this league if he can stay healthy. I'm not sold yet on Bonito. I think he's got great pass rushing capabilities, but I still kind of worry about him setting the edge. But with Gregory coming back and hopefully Browning coming back, the team on defense may not miss a beat. We'll see. Obviously, I hope they're both healthy coming out of the bye and can start playing, which would be huge. But if they can't, what do you think the outlooks are of that pass rush without Chubb? If Gregory's still not ready to go, or Browning's not still ready to go, we're looking at Bonito and probably Cooper on that pass rushing edge group.
Yeah, I would be very interested, I suppose, to see how Benito, like a lot of the times, young edge rushers need a bit of time again to develop in different ways. And Aiden Hutchinson is really struggling, the second overall pick, and even Trayvon Walker he's flashed at times, but it's almost like the Jags issue. Like all their young guys have flashed at times, but they haven't been able to put together a consistent game. So yeah, Benito getting additional snaps to me is a good thing. Jonathan Cooper, I think he overperforms where he was drafted, but I think sometimes some of Broncos country have ridiculous expectations for him.
Sure.
He's a contributor. He's a solid player. But he's not. I don't think he's going to take over games. I think he has moments, certainly, and he can take advantage of opportunities that present themselves. But can he consistently create those opportunities for himself? That's what the best pass rushers do, right? They create those opportunities consistently. They find ways to win, and they're constantly testing. Like it's amazing. One of my favorite. I love listening to D-line guys and O-line guys tell the stories. And when you hear stories about like the way in which DeMarcus Ware used to test out the O-line guys and figure out what their weakness was, and then just relentlessly go at that. And Von doing the same thing. Now Von's natural ability meant that his bend, his quickness, he always had an advantage over people, but he always tried to find what was your weakness and attack that. And that's what truly separates the greats from the goods. So yeah, I get it. I get your concern a little bit around Gregory, but once the deal was done and you had ponied up the money for the couple of years, I also think when it comes to contracts in the league, we probably need to look at it, because the headline figure yesterday was that Chubb got the 5-year deal. But when you break it down, it's the same with any contract, right? What does it really mean? What's the cap hit, what's the dead cap, etc.
Right.
Gregory's here for a couple of years, certainly, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's that. Look, the reality is that if they aren't ready to go, that is a significant step down, and that will impact on the defense, because when you had two guys, particularly say Gregory when he was on the field and Chubb, that makes such a difference to have two guys. Like, look at the Rams this year, right? Like, not having lost Von, like, teams are able, and some of that is probably Donald getting a little bit older, but teams are now able to double team or triple team Aaron Donald and not worry about the other side. And that makes an enormous difference. They couldn't do that last year. Same as our Super Bowl 50 team. Like, if you want to double team Von, cool. Well, what are you going to do about DeMarcus? And that was a little bit for the Broncos when we had Chubb and Gregory were there, and Chubb demanded respect, and he demanded that the opposition, always had to consider him. So there will be a drop off. It will be interesting to see how our defensive coordinator, who has been fantastic thus far, how he copes with that.
Absolutely. And also don't forget, like, if you don't have those edge rushers, I think Draymond Jones won't get as many plays as well, because they can take away your better players. So I'm a little concerned with it, but again, if Browning and Gregory are back after the bye and healthy and ready to go, I'm not as concerned. I just wanted to say Travis Weber came in, say good morning. So I want to say good morning to you, Travis. Thank you for supporting the show. Yeah, be safe and stay warm. Yeah, we definitely want to do that. So let me ask you this. We're kind of getting towards the end of the show. It's a 35, 40-minute show here. Russell Wilson, what do you see from him? I know he's had a rough go starting out. What is your projection for him? After seeing what he did in London, there's been some flashes. What do you think he's got in store for us for the rest of the season? What's your gut tell you? However you want to answer it.
I think he'll improve. I do. I think that everything that happened with the trade, right? He's probably a little bit chastened himself. I'm sure he thought he was going to come across, and it was going, like, there were all these primetime games. It was going to be let Russ cook. It was going to be fantastic. It was all the talk of the potential. And look, and you hate to see it, but the reality is that it became a joke to most people. The memification was there, and that's got to hurt a little bit, and he's got to want to change that and change the perception of him, and I think that's probably going to help us. So I think we're not going to see. I don't think we see peak Russ. I don't think we see it this year. I don't know if we ever see it, but I think what Russ can be is can Russ get back into that top 10 to 12 range, and can that be pretty effective if you have everything else around him, and if you have a defense, if Gregory and Baron Browning are there, and given how good the secondary is, we can be a force. We can win close games. Can we get to a point where we're averaging, 22 points, 23 points a game rather than 16, 17. That would be an enormous step forward this year. And then hopefully again in the off season, you take another step forward. To me, I think we should be capable of that. I think when the schedule came out, and this is always the danger when you look at a schedule when it comes out, the worry was, right, oh my goodness, the back end of the schedule looks terrifying. And I just don't think that's the case now, Thomas, because the Titans, I think the Titans are an incredibly well-coached team, right? I think Vrabel does a really good job. He has them well drilled. They don't really make mistakes, and then they capitalize on yours. But they're not a juggernaut. The Raiders are, under Josh McDaniels, it has been awful. The Panthers have obviously rebounded under Wilkes, but you're not thinking that that's an unwinnable game. Granted, then you have a stretch where you have the Ravens and the Chiefs, and both of those are serious teams with serious head coaches. But then you're looking at the Cardinals and the Rams. I think both of those should be winnable games too. So to me, I don't think the back end of the schedule should be nearly as scary. I think Russ can improve. I hope he improves. If he doesn't improve, obviously we'll have a different conversation. But I want to, as a fan, I want to have hope without it being toxic positivity. I want to hope that Russ and the team and the offense can improve. And I do believe that the week away in London will have helped. I think the bye will have come at a really good time. Coming out, like if they'd lost that game, can you imagine how down things would be going into the bye? But I think coming out, and we'll see early against the Titans, because probably the best aspect of the Titans game outside of Derrick Henry is their D-line. It's really impressive. Our O-line's going to get an early test. We're going to see how Russ does very quickly once they take the field against the Titans.
Absolutely. And, I've seen flashes. We've all seen flashes of Russell Wilson. He can put it together here and there. If he can put full games together like you see in a quarter or whatnot, I think you'll have a much more improved Russ, a much more improved Broncos team. And that's what we're all hoping for. And, if the playoffs, I've kind of given up on any hope for the playoffs. But, those one-score games flip the other way, you could see a nice little run to end the season. I'll keep my fingers crossed for it. So, Colum, I really appreciate you coming on. You want to give your show a little bit of a plug, the Irish NFL show? Tell us when it's on, how many times a week, whatnot.
Yeah, appreciate that, and delighted to join you, Thomas. Been I think we've been following each other on Twitter for a good time. I always enjoy your insights. So to have the opportunity to come on, I really appreciate that. The Irish NFL show, yeah. If you are watching this or listening to this, and you're somebody who likes listening to people who don't pronounce the H and TH words, and you want to listen to us talk about the NFL, and we've been very fortunate that we have had great guests on. We spoke to Joe Shane, Mickey Loomis, Tom Telesco, Chris Ballard, spoke to Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings head coach. So we have had really, really good people on. We go live 3 times a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. For Mountain Time, that would ordinarily be about 2 p.m. But we are available in audio format as well, which might make a lot more sense to people in the States. You can find us across all of the podcast platforms. Just search Irish NFL Show, and you will see our big smiley Irish heads. And you can subscribe to us there. And you can find me on Twitter. I love interacting with fans from all around the world. So do search at Colum from Cork or Irish NFL Show. Find us, interact. Love chatting to fans from everywhere.
Thank you very much. I loved your show. You've had 2 of my favorites on there that I've seen. Carl Mecklenburg's been on your show, I believe, and so has Howard Griffith, 2 of my favorites, underrated players. I'm just going to ask you one more question before we leave. Who's your most favorite underrated Bronco player? One that people don't think is an incredible player, but one of your favorites.
That's a good question. I when you asked first, I thought you were going to say who would I most want to interview, and for me, that would be Shannon Sharp, because I think he would be incredible. In terms of who is under. it's tough to say he was maybe underrated, but I would love the opportunity to talk to TJ Ward, because I think he was such an integral part of that Super Bowl team, and because he went underrated, like Talib, I think would be. Yeah, we've had Talib on his box office. I think TJ Ward would have so many great stories. So I'm gonna go TJ. Look, there's a host of people, and yeah, Carl and Howard Griffith, super guys. So humble and so generous with their time. And you rightly, I would put my hand up as well. Two of my favorite all-time Broncos.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Colum. I appreciate it. Thanks for the show, you guys. If you didn't see it live or ask questions, jump on Twitter, ask Colum any questions you want about football, or me as well. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time for everybody jumping into the comments. So thank you very much, and we will see you next week, Friday, as usual. Thank you very much.